Hi, I'm Daniel, and today I want to show you this great Outstanding Scholars project you can do while on student exchange. It's called Autoethnography on Exchange. For those who don't know me, I'm a third-year student studying law and politics at the University of Windsor. I'm currently on exchange in Heidelberg for the whole year. I'm learning about autoethnography in a pedagogical exercise. On the exchange, I've rekindled my love for hiking as well as watched a lot of football, or as it's called over in Canada, soccer. These words on the slide are just a few of many words I'd use to describe my exchange. Eating schnitzel and redefining. So, while I'm on exchange in Germany, there's two main things I'm doing: eating schnitzel and redefining myself. Now, look at the top right, defining. I'll define autoethnography for you. In fact, let's split it into two words, auto and ethnography. Auto refers to the researcher's own experiences, while ethnography, it's the writing of the cultural context where these experiences are situated. All in all, it's a research method that allows you to connect personal experiences into your research, which also has some benefits I'll discuss later. I did this project as a pedagogical exercise, so this increased flexibility on my end as an exchange student, and it allowed me to dig deeper on the things I found most interesting about the project. It's a great way to give the possibility for outstanding scholars to go on exchange. So, if you're an outstanding scholar and you're not yet in your final year, it's definitely something to think about. I'd recommend it 1,000 times. I mean, just look at how good the schnitzel are here. Also, the project taught me to be a much better writer. As you'll see later in the literature reviewed section, the project had me read about various things that made me a better author, as well as a better qualitative researcher. All around, it was a great learning experience for me. You have the freedom to do so many things while you're 6,000 kilometers away. What about going on a hike? Look at the top picture from my experiences. 315,000 steps in a single week. Like I said earlier, my love for hiking definitely was rekindled. Look at the picture on the left side of my experiences. Here's a scene to bring it to life. Put yourself in my shoes. Imagine if you were some 6,000 kilometers away from your hometown, and while you're on a hike, you see some really interesting art. It fascinates you. Think about how you'd feel in that moment. Would you just look and appreciate it? Your friends are pretty far away. I suppose you could take a picture of the art and send it to them. Well, this happened to me, and I did those things I mentioned, but I also decided to journal about how that art made me feel. After so many weeks of learning how to journal effectively like an autoethnographer, it was finally time to put it to the test. And I ended up writing my favorite journal entry on that day. But the experience can't always be described best using pictures. Let me see, maybe if I just zoom in here on the experience section. Oh, that's better. See what it says there on the whiteboard? Flexibility. Right. It's designed to be more flexible than other outstanding scholars placements, right? I had a 6-hour time zone difference with Windsor, and this project made that not such a big factor since it was very flexible. Also, possibilities. There's so many routes this autoethnography project can take you. The project, it's as limitless as your thoughts and ideas while on exchange, and trust me, exchange gives you a lot of those. Also, the Outstanding Scholars project fits the exchange like a glove. It made my experience on exchange a whole lot better, and definitely a more thought-provoking one. It really is meant for exchange students. And the best part, as an outstanding scholar, you don't have to worry about losing placements in the program if you're thinking about going on exchange. What makes autoethnography so unique is that you are, and I'm actually quoting the author, Christopher Poulos here, you're like a fly on the wall. So this means that while in most types of research you can't escape looking like a researcher all the time, this type of research reaches a more personal level. Autoethnography oftentimes blends yourself into the experience with others. The author, Poulos, he gave examples when this can be practical, like a first-hand view when researching racism. Some things are just simply too subtle to research in other ways. Matter of fact, if you're watching this in your home or in your office, I want you to look around right now and see if you can find something that can bring back memories flooding in. I'll give you a second. Look around and see if there's anything that just kicks a spark in your brain. That's what Poulos, the author of this book, did. He ended up looking at a baseball in his room, and he ended up remembering the time him and his dad, they'd practice baseball together with that very object. This led him to exploring and making one of his most personal and deep autoethnographies. Another thing I learned during this project are the 7 basic plots. So these are the 7 main types of storylines that have emerged throughout the history of storytelling. You know, if I viewed my exchange as a story, I'd definitely say it's the plot, voyage, and return. Sort of like an Alice in Wonderland type of story. Because Heidelberg, it sort of does feel like Wonderland. Also, there was the Kolb's learning cycle. I learned how to apply Kolb's learning cycle in my own life, something I'll show soon. The basic idea is to select an experience interesting to yourself and dissect it so that you can grasp how to improve in future situations. Another thing I reviewed was how to make a quick literature review, known as rapid review. Up next, we have my autocartography. So there's a lot that went into this. These are just a few of the things, though, that the Outstanding Scholars project has taught me. This is a mind map of some sorts. So let's start with the emotion section. These are the emotions I felt while on exchange. So we'll start with clean slate. This is something that I learned very quickly. It's that you are whoever you want to be when you're on exchange, right? Usually, if you're in your home university, a lot of people might already know you, but in this case, when you're on exchange, you really can just reinvent yourself, even if it's just temporarily. Try new things out. And the second thing is personal growth. So during my time here, I definitely grew a lot personally. And while this can be debated if this should be in the emotion section, there was definitely an emotional part of me that also grew during this exchange. Up next, the articles on autoethnography. So I talked about these earlier, the 7 basic plots, the rapid review, Kolb's learning cycle. But I also did a few exercises, like the proxemics exercise, where I had to dig deep into my brain to figure out where I sit in public transport and the thought process behind it. Also, I made my own exercise, the 5 senses exercise. I also received some different types of accreditation during this Outstanding Scholars project. So I did TCPS2, which it's a certification on research ethics, but I definitely also got a lot of skills that are really going to help me in my future, like my writing skills. They've gotten tremendously better, and the project and this exchange in general really helped me and also sort of forced me to become a better communicator and crossing certain cultural barriers. Up next, my journey. So I've gone to so many different places, like Heidelberg, Catalonia, the St. James Pilgrimage, all just during this project. And I've also met so many different types of people, right? I'll give you an example, right? The ceramic artist. Remember I was talking earlier about the journey of seeing some new art? That was in Catalonia, and I also met the artist who was behind it. He's super talented, and he had a fascinating life story, something that I only have this project to thank for meeting him. I want to bring you all with me on something that I've experienced on exchange. Similar to my hike through Spain in many ways, where I also faced some challenges there, but ultimately learned from it. In this example, something happened. I was missing some key study terms in exams. I'm sure a lot of people can relate. I discovered 2 missing terms in my study materials the night before an exam, and I felt immediate panic and self-criticism, and that definitely worsened my stress. I recognized that the professor required some specific lecture-based answers that weren't available on any of his PowerPoints, so I had to either take notes or not know it for the exam. I ended up reaching out to a friend for help who shared those notes and then we studied together. So finally, I did feel relief after studying, but also a little bit of regret for not preparing earlier. So after that, I had a change in mindset. I'll call it the growth mindset. I realized that my initial response was self criticism instead of problem solving, and I noticed how these negative thought patterns often intensified my anxiety. Reaching out for help ended up shifting the focus from failure to solutions, where I saw the value of collaboration in studying. I also acknowledged the difficulty of perfect preparation during a busy exam week because nobody's perfect. And I learned that adapting and seeking help, it's a good way to overcoming mistakes. So, how did I end up learning from it? Well, for one thing, I looked a bit online for some research papers and I identified Lazarus and Folkman's transactional model of stress and coping as pretty important here. I learned that stress responses, it starts with emotional reactions before rational problem solving. And I recognized that the panic, it was an emotion focused response rather than a logical one. So, what did I end up learning from this? Well, for starters, spending 30 minutes at the start of a busy week to plan ahead on your study time, it can go a long way. Also, making friends early in a semester for study support is key, right? In my case, it was crucial. Finally, using meditation and calming techniques to reduce your stress, it's really helpful if you want to handle stressful situations more effectively. So, wrapping this up, I want to leave you with this thought. Being on exchange, it's not always about distance traveled or experiences, but also the transformation that comes from stepping into the unknown. Through autoethnography, I've learned to look at life not just as a series of events, but also as a story worth analyzing, understanding, and sharing. My exchange in Heidelberg is still ongoing, and so is my journey of self discovery. Thank you for allowing me to share a part of it with you today.